Hello everyone, my name is Requiz, and today I would like to give you all a primer on a hero that I've recently mentioned in my Bloodstone hero tier list. I've been seeing decent success with, and, more importantly, also a hero I've been having a lot of fun with in the offlane. Their favorite drink is a Bloody Mary, probably. It's Bloodseeker, so more specifically, Core Bloodseeker. In these videos, I take the time to crystallize some of the learnings that I've done with a particular hero, and every so often I even revisit these guides and update them by delving into more advanced concepts, or when there's other developments of how the hero is played, such as a big patch like 7.33. For this primer, we will start by introducing Bloodseeker's kit, after which we will discuss their laning, skill build, their general playstyle, when to pick them, their preferred itemization, and lastly, which talents to pick in each game. In a sentence, Bloodseeker is a hard-hitting agi hero that as a core likes to bully their opponents in lane by continuously trading with them and then healing up to full by hitting some creeps. Bloodseeker loves to go hunting with his supports to get a free kill with Rupture and then straight back to hitting creeps until his next Rupture. This is how he makes the map super scary to play for the opponents. Let's shortly talk about their kit. Their Q, Blood Rage, is a target spell that buffs allies, including Bloodseeker, by giving them attack speed, only half for allies, and spell amplification for 8 seconds. Now, on level 4, this spell only has an 8-second cooldown, making it a 100% uptime spell. The catch? It also does 1.8% of the total health of the buffed hero in non-lethal damage each second. So that's about 15% of their total HP in damage. Now this ability can also be upgraded with Bloodseeker's Shard. With the Shard, Blood Rage makes Bloodseeker do damage to the opponents hit by the right clicks based on 1% of the opponent's max health pool in pure damage. So this is very strong against beefy targets. Bloodseeker heals for all the damage done this way. This shard, combined with Bloodseeker's crazy attack speed, enables Bloodseeker to do a lot of pure damage and heal himself whilst doing so. This ability is already crazy good to put on some of the allied heroes, so if it ever gets buffed in the future, make sure to have it on your broken bullshit radar. Their W, Bloodrite, is a ground-targeted AoE spell, kind of like Kunkka's Torrent spell. This spell creates a large Full Metal Alchemist circle on the ground, visible to everybody, that implodes after 2.9 seconds. When the circle finally implodes, all enemies in the circle receive pure damage and are silenced. This spell has a very strong level 1 and is a useful zoning tool as well as strong follow-up spell for the entirety of the game. Their E, Thirst, is a passive that makes Bloodseeker a speedy boy. It gives Bloodseeker bonus movement speed if an enemy falls below 80% of their total health. The amount of bonus movement speed received increases as the enemy hero has less health. So after they've taken about 20% of their health or more in damage. The bonus movement speed maxes out when the enemy is at 25% of their total health. And when the enemy has less than 25% of their total health remaining, Thirst will also start giving vision and true sight on all of those low health enemies. Now these Thirst bonuses stack, so if 2 heroes are low HP, Bloodseeker receives double bonus movement speed. This passive also allows Bloodseeker to have more movement speed than the maximum movement speed for most heroes. So in theory, he can go faster than heroes with a haste rune. On top of this, Thirst also heals Bloodseeker when he last hits or denies creeps and heroes. The healing received is a percentage based on the maximum health of the hero or creep. If the hero or creep dies outside of a 300 unit radius from Bloodseeker, the healing received is only half. The healing is also halved for all denials, or when an ally confirms a kill on an enemy hero near Bloodseeker. Their ultimate, Rupture, is probably Bloodseeker's signature move for most people. A true noob killer. Everybody fondly or not so fondly remembers their first encounter with Bloodseeker. You saw him, you got ruptured, you panicked, and you fed. Rupture is cast on an enemy unit and it instantaneously deals 10% of their current health in pure damage. For the duration that Rupture is applied to the enemy, they take pure damage for a percentage of the distance that they move. So the more they move, even by forced movement, the more pure damage they take. Lastly, their Aghanim Scepter ability, Bloodmist. After acquiring Aghanim Scepter, Bloodseeker gains the ability to become a budget pudge, or dare I say, Lashrak. This ability can be turned on and off, but it has a 3-second cooldown after turning it on. This means you have to turn it on for at least 3 seconds when you decide to use this ability. When turned on, Bloodseeker does 7% of his own maximum health in damage to all enemies and himself in an AoE as magical damage. Yes, you heard it right. This is the only ability from Bloodseeker that does not do pure damage. And since Bloodmist is magical damage, the self-damage can be reduced using magical resistance. So it combines very well with the new BKB and other magic resist items. Now when Bloodmist is turned on, note that the healing gained from Thirst is also increased by a whopping 50%. This is pretty incredible together with the passive that Bloodmist provides, which was newly introduced in 7.33. Any overhealing done by Bloodseeker regarding of Bloodmist being turned on or off will create an all damage barrier that can stack up to half of Bloodseeker's maximum health. So when fully overhealed, Bloodseeker can have 150% of his health, which creates a lot of tanking potential. Now this particular change got me very interested in playing some Bloodseeker offlane. Now that we've gotten the gist of their kit, let us talk about laning. Bloodseeker is in most cases a lane dominator. From a 1 or 2 depending on when you skilled your Thirst passive, Bloodseeker can start trading with the opponent and heal up on the creeps after. Most heroes need to build healing items or use consumables to consistently trade, but Bloodseeker can do it early, continuously, and without having to spend any money on those silly items. Herein lies the key to Bloodseeker's laning. As long as you can hit creeps, you can probably outtrade the opponents. Now, depending on the lane and what happens at the runes, Bloodseeker starts with a point in Bloodright or in Thirst. Bloodright is a crazy spell if you can land it, which also tells you exactly how many points you should put into it. If you can comfortably land Bloodright on the opponents, you can consider putting more than 1 point in. With the first level of Bloodright, you do 120 pure damage, which is about 40% of the range creep's health. Now this should give you a clear indication of when to use Bloodright to secure the range creep. Most enemies don't want to stand in Bloodright, so you can usually cast Bloodright and then just walk up to the range creep and secure the last hit. Now be cognizant of whether you hit the melee creeps as well. If you want to push the wave hard to then like slingshot it back into your tower for the next few waves, you should hit the melee creeps and maybe even click the melee creeps down yourself as well. But if you want to keep the wave where it is right now, you're probably better off aiming at only the range creep and maybe zoning out one of your opponents. Bloodright can also be used to zone out heroes that are going on you or your support, or when they are running away towards safety, which is usually their tower. It is, however, a trade-off that you have to make very consciously. Bloodseeker needs points in Thirst and his Q, Blood Rage, to farm effect. So if you end up putting multiple points in Bloodright and then you get booted out of lane, you're going to be very sad, and the only blood you will be tasting is from your own mouth after the opponent slap you down again and again. The rule of thumb is as follows. Are you and can you play to win the lane? then putting more than 1 point in blood rate is something that you can consider. This is also why you will see most carry and core Bloodseekers only get that 1 value point in blood rate. After that, they max blood rage and get at least 2 or 3 points in thirst before even thinking about blood rate. The earlier you have 4 points in blood rage, the earlier you are flash farming. Bloodseeker prefers to lane with a support that can help them man up to opposing heroes and or help Bloodseeker hit their blood rite ability reliably. Heroes such as Techies, Treant, Lich, Oracle, Venomancer, Lion, Shadow Shaman, Rubik, to name a few. These are ranged heroes, heroes with good harassing tools or disable, or all of the above. So to wrap up, this is the safe and probably best build. W to fight at runes and get the range creeps. Then 2 points in E to sustain and dominate the lane. Then 1 point in Q to prepare yourself for farming those sweet neutrals. Then at level 5 you can choose to get another point in Q if you think the 2 points in E are sustaining you enough, and otherwise you just take the 3rd point in E first. Then you take your ult at level 6, unless you're a position 1 that really needs to do some AFK catch-up farming in the jungle. But usually, it is worth it to take Rupture, since most supports just kinda die when you Rupture them and then run at them. Then, at level 7, 8, and maybe 9, you max out your Blood Rage. After that, we max out our other skills whilst skipping the level 10 talent. So 0, 1, 2 into 1, 1, 3 into ultimate into maxing your blood rage, after which you will max all of your other skills, and then you go into your talents. We've discussed the possibilities of more points in your W, but you have to make that decision very actively and don't autopilot it. But again, that is the trade-off. Your contribution to early fights is mostly your Rupture and Blood Rage until you can find an isolated target to fully commit on using your Blood Rage. So let's talk about playstyle. Early on, Bloodseeker plays to dominate their lane and gobble up their side of the map. Once Bloodseeker has their ultimate ability, they prefer to hit the jungle and come out every time their ult is off cooldown. Bloodseeker makes the map very scary for the opponents by hiding in the jungle like this. If opponents show themselves out of position, they immediately run the risk of being ruptured and ran at by Bloodseeker and subsequently being picked off. This is how Bloodseeker likes to farm up into the mid-game. In the mid-game, Bloodseeker prioritizes farming their first 2 items, but is still up to join a fight once Thirst kicks in, allowing them to charge into the fight like a budget spear breaker. Basically, Bloodseeker can rotate towards any part of the map whilst farming the camps that they find in between. Bloodseeker can be a man-up type hero that goes when they are going. This is why Bloodseeker has classically loved to build BKB. This item symbolizes his most common fighting style fairly well. Hard commit on a juicy target and use BKB to confirm the kill. After confirming the kill, Bloodseeker can either safely disengage or keep snowballing for more. Bloodseeker does exactly as his name advertises. He looks for kills in the fights. Once he gets a kill, he recovers so much of his health that this usually will allow him to snowball the fight in his favor. This further incentivizes him to hard commit on a target, because that reward is ever so sweet. Now in lane, Bloodseeker hates losing his lane. Bloodseeker can't really go into the jungle super early to catch back up on farm, and it generally just feels kind of bad to play Bloodseeker from behind. This is why you like to pick him with a support that enables him, and preferably into a lane that he can sustain or even dominate with his thirst trading. Traditionally, you've seen Bloodseeker being picked with heroes such as Lich, who helps Bloodseeker trade even more unfairly with Frost Shield, keeps enemies at low health with his Frost Blast, and holds them in place with Sinister Gaze to set up the Blood Right. Any support that can replicate some of that Lich energy is a good bet. Now in the game, Bloodseeker hates an enemy team that punishes hard commitments to fights really well. An example of this is Medusa, traditionally a very bad matchup for Bloodseeker. If Bloodseeker ever commits on her, she just kinda doesn't care about the rupture, she just stands her ground, and then she uses her ultimate once she sees Bloodseeker commit his BKB. Axe kind of feels similar for Bloodseeker, where he can get blink called as soon as he runs in and or pops his BKB. And lastly, it's also heroes that just disrupt regeneration, such as AA, Necro, Pudge, Drow, etc. Bloodseeker is kind of fine playing into almost anything, but if you see too many of the previously mentioned type heroes, you might want to pick another hero. Now, assuming that you're picking a second phase on the ladder, you want to do the following checks. Enemy heroes, do you see an AA, Drow, or support that enables a potential hard counter, such as a melee 5 or a mana pumping hero that might indicate that elusive Medusa pick? On the other hand, do you have a lane winning support on your team? If your support wants to consistently rotate and let you be solo, for example, then you might want to lean towards picking a Vanguard-oriented offlaner instead. Lastly, let us take a quick look at his Dota buff page. As mentioned before, Bloodseeker is weak into heroes that don't really care about rupture and stand their ground really well. Bloodseeker is really good against heroes that want to weave in and out of fights or hate getting hit by percentage-based pure damage, which are usually those tanky boys. Now, Invis heroes have a special hatred for Bloodseeker, since his thirst does provide global true sight on them as soon as they are low HP. Rupture and Thirst can also do the same to find those very elusive illusion heroes. As we discussed previously, Bloodseeker has a hard time disengaging, just how Axe has a hard time disengaging after going for his blink call. So with your items, you usually look to remedy this or to double down on this. Speaking of which, let's talk about items. For Bloodseeker, I currently envision 3 general paths that you can take. Now first we have red-clicking core, magical damage core, and third, the red-clicking core commits to fights pretty hard and face checks the opponents. You buy items that abuse your massive attack speed, such as your shard, a maelstrom, and a basher. Magical damage core is more focused on weaving in and out of the fights and sharking out those low HP heroes. You buy items that makes you a budget Leshrac, such as Aghanims and Bloodstone. The third support is focused on buffing up his teammates with Blood Rage, his items, and his auras. You basically purchase anything that screams support item. Once you have your core items as Bloodseeker, you could start running at your opponents with impunity, but you'd rather just keep farming until your thirst starts peaking. You will quickly learn that as a Bloodseeker, it is very hard to not run at people when you're very fast. Like Sonic. Itemization on Bloodseeker can be fairly diverse, but in 99% of games, I try to go with the following starting items. Only 1 set of tangos, double branch, quelling blade, and wraithband parts. Feel free to change this up, of course, but make sure that you do enough damage. Bloodseeker relies on having high damage to reliably get last hit and out-trade their opponent. Some sessions in the last hit trainer are of course recommended, since the hero gets rewarded both gold and HP for last hits. But you should probably be able to pick this hero up without too much practice. This is not some like Death Prophet techies or some other hero with terrible last hitting animations. Bloodseeker's last hit animation is quite average. Now I usually like skipping stick as a starting item, but in some lanes it's just too efficient, so be sure to get it when it's good. Basically only when they have a hero that spams their spells off cooldown at level 1 or 2, or when they are tri-laning you. My first courier usually brings me the Wraithband recipe, no regen, and maybe a branch or a stick, and after that I usually rush the blades of attack in the lane to really bump up that right-clicking damage. Then we finish up the phase boots to chase down supports that didn't bother buying brown boots, and then magic stick for value if you don't have it already. And then we move on to our core items. Now, if you plan on AFK farming anyways, or you think that you can pull it off, you can consider further skipping the stick to accelerate your farm by getting your farming item ever so slightly earlier. You are usually looking for a 13 to 14 minute maelstrom or a about 17 minute radiance, which will accelerate your farm going into your second core item, which is the item that will help you to keep joining fights. Making sure that you hit these first two item timings cleanly feel really good on Bloodseeker. Focus on your farm and only make moves when you have a rupture off cooldown until you've completed your core items at least. For right clicking, you will likely opt for the tried and true BKB. So you can click BKB, kill a guy, and either snowball the fight or just reset. For the magic build, I've been liking the Glimmer Cape for the utility. This gives you movement speed, a magic barrier, magic resistance, on top of making you invisible. This budget Shadow Blade is perfect for weaving in and out of fights from the offlane. Glimmer Cape helps you hunt for rupture targets in the side lanes, and later on it also helps you sustain through the Bloodmist self-damage. After building these core items, you'll usually get your Aghanim Scepter and eventually your Shard, combined with complementary items for your chosen fighting style, such as Bloodstone for the magic build and Mjolnir Basher for the right-clicky build. You'll generally itemize to make sure that you can fight, and then start adding problem-solving items on top of that, such as Skadi Shivas for heal negation, Nullifier for dispelling the opponent's Windranger, Manta as like an extra dispel for yourself, and so on. Each game is different, so you'll have to assess which items will allow you to play fights in that particular game. For some games, you'll just need to rush a halberd, whereas in others, you might suddenly need a forestaff or a dispel item to even play the game. Usually, the biggest problem will be not being able to dictate when you commit onto opponents. In those particular hard games, you might just want to go for the third support lifestyle. You can still contribute your spells and buffs, which can be a lot more valuable than just being a melee creep that runs in and dies embarrassing death after embarrassing death. Before you forget, with the neutral tokens, you can actually reliably get your neutral items of choice, so let's go over those as well. For the tier 1 items, you are looking for items that allow you to farm up to your first farming item. This usually means some kind of mana item or stats that will help you hit creeps/heroes. For the tier 2 items, you are looking for items that make you more durable so you can confidently join all of the fights. For the later neutral items, it really starts to depend on what build you're going for. With right clicks, you want to take neutral items that allow you to hit hard and keep hitting those opponents, whereas the magical build, you really just want magic resistance to lower that self-damage from Bloodmist and kind of tank up. Now, sadly, for the tier 3 items, the item pool kind of shrinks a bit for Bloodseeker, as you'd ideally hit the Titan Sliver, Paladin Sword, or Cloak of Flames. Then going into the tier 4 items, you want Ninja Gear, or Penna Edge, or even Mindbreaker for the right-clicking, whereas you really want Trickster's Cloak or Martyr's Plate for the magic build. Lastly, we'll wrap this up by quickly talking about the talents. For the 10th level, you want to skip the talent for a bit until you've maxed all of your other skills, since both options do not significantly increase your farming speed or your damage output. When finally taking the talent, you want to go attack speed if you're right-clicking or buffing right-clickers, or you want to go spell amp if you are doing the magic build / mainly buffing other spellcasters. The attack speed is usually the safe choice. For the 15th level, we take 8% rupture damage. I think both of these talents are not very appealing, but the 8% rupture damage has a higher win rate on Dota buff. The Bloodright damage does not feel good anyways. Even with max Bloodright and Spell Amp, it is literally impossible to one-shot creep waves. Bloodright is also on a 12-second cooldown, which makes it not very spammable. Like, you might get too off in a fight. So let's all make a deal together. Never pick the Bloodright talent in a winning game. Maybe it will get buffed or changed and become actually useful. For the 20th level, I love taking the 15% spell lifesteal to sustain in fights with Bloodmist when going the magical build. The Rupture cast range, however, is very good, although its win rate is a bit lower on Dota buff. I like the Rupture cast range in games where Rupture makes the game unplayable for certain heroes. Think about Pango and Slark. More importantly, it can also just prevent heroes from kiting you when you are trying to right-click them to death. And then for the 25th level, we take the second Rupture charge always. Combined with the previous Rupture talents, this one will make teamfights a living hell for the opponents. The Thirst movement speed is just kind of a meme, but I must admit that I haven't tried it myself, so let me know down below if it's secretly completely and utterly broken. And this concludes my primer on Core Bloodseeker. I played him a bunch this new patch, trying out the new Bloodmist with magic build, and I've been having a ton of fun with it. Be sure to give it a go in any core position really. Bloodseeker makes the map a very scary place after he gets his level 6 and some core items. He encourages tears in the eyes of any mobility-reliant hero, and his snowballing potential is off the charts. So if you like the sound of surgically dominating fights, I recommend you give Bloodmist Bloodseeker a shot. Thank you all for watching, and until we meet again, cheers.